rocking and rolling. Down to the beach I'm strolling. But the seagulls poke at my
That's
head.
so
Not
good.
fun. I said, seagulls, stop it now.
15 seconds left.
Everyone told me not to stroll on that beach. Said seagulls gonna come, hook me in the coconut, and they did, and they did, had me going like,
Hello, good morning. Turn this down so it's not so loud. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. How is chat? I know we got a couple people that have joined a little bit earlier today. Hopefully you guys have had a wonderful quarantine. As you can see, we have our own quarantine survivor in chat as well at this point. Actually, on the stream, not chat, right?
Yeah, I'm going for more of that Thor in Avengers Endgame. I wanted to do the Blazer. I was gonna do it, but you know what? There are so many people out there that probably look at video chats and meetings and go, I gotta get all dressed up for 45 minutes on a video conference. This is the truth here. This is the real truth for everyone out there. And I've said it even on calls that I literally wear a bandana because my hair is out of control. And I am, you know what? We're just gonna live that truth today on Confab.
Yeah, no, that's that. Anytime we've been broadcasting now on any type of meeting that we have, if the camera's not on, it's just like I know I've got a ball cap on, I've got all these different things going on. So,
This.
hey, Woodstock, yeah, exactly.
So I can help you if needed. Whenever you're ready to make the plunge.
Well, Ron
I
goes.
will. I'll call you up.
Ron, one of our sales guys at Stoneridge, he goes to me. He's like, you just got to use less product, and I'm like, no, actually, it's the opposite. When you start, because I've got the spiky hair, right? So when I start doing that, it starts spiking up higher and higher. And then
Yep.
during conversations with people, I get people looking up at my hair as I'm talking, and so I'm just like, it's getting a little long here. So. Yeah, well, anyways, welcome guys for another Confab. Today, hopefully, we'll have a better experience in terms of connectivity. I know that they are working on the internet in our neighborhood, and I think that that's better. And I also upgraded. So I have now a gigabit internet access. So I'm hoping that that will help with the upload speeds because we're all streaming coming over to my place in my residential area and then broadcasting to the world. So yeah, hopefully you guys have had a great time. We have been pretty much in quarantine now for how many days are we at, guys? Like
Does time exist anymore?
That's what I was thinking too.
I don't. My clock says 11:02, so I kind of know we're on schedule. But the day I think it's Thursdays. Confab is on, right? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's Thursdays, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well-
March 42nd or something.
Is that what it is? 40,
Yeah.
42nd. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. 42nd. So today, what we wanted to do, beyond the bantering, and I think all of us are anxious to get out. Hopefully, I've been out with the family, going obviously to different walks. We've walked more as a family than ever. But I've also focused a little bit this week on some of the IoT concepts that are out there. And I think what we wanted to do today was really just start diving into this a little bit deeper. More specifically, and I'm going to turn off my Teams meetings because I'm already getting emails and pop-ups that are happening. But I guess what we want to do is just cover a concept I think that a lot of people have been exploring, but really don't know where to start. And I have to say that when I went through this exercise, it was a lot. I mean, there's a lot to go through when it comes to IoT, or what we call the Internet of Things. And I know, Adam, we had talked a bit about this. There's just so many different devices that are out there as well that you can start realizing this. But how long has this feature been with field service, for example, out in the wild that you've seen?
I remember talking about this quite a while back. So when field service really started, getting front and center in solutions, and this is just, I would say, just after the acquisition and rolling into the full application offering. IoT was already being murmured and it was there, so it's been there for years. And a lot of the prospects we speak with, or the clients that we speak with, there are housing organizations. There are, you've heard Satya Nadella and some of the people speak at some of the conferences about like the connected edge and some of these devices that are out in the field. So agriculture is a big thing at Stoneridge. Actually tapping into these pieces. That conversation has been rolling for quite some time for field service, specifically for pretty hardcore for the past four-ish years.
Yeah,
Three-ish.
yeah, absolutely. And guys, as we're going through this, feel free to ping us in chat with questions that you have. Like we said, this is a real-time broadcast, so anything you want to talk about when it comes to IoT, we'd love to build on that today. I guess kind of the cool things that we've heard recently is that we're becoming more engaged as well with opportunities that really rely on this technology. I know, Marcus, you had mentioned to me that there was somebody that was really looking forward to seeing the stream, so welcome,
Yep.
number one. But it was around IoT capabilities that they were trying to tackle as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, having devices in the field and being able to take measurements off the device to do proactive maintenance, to do even billing transactions potentially.
Okay. And that's pretty cool. I mean,
Yep.
so water meters have always had that, right? I remember the meters, they'd come and they made it more of they could drive by and scan it. And now they're getting to a point where they use cell phone technology to connect and send that data via wireless. And the devices are just becoming so cheap now, too. For this presentation, I really wanted to have a device. We had talked about it, but shipping from China right now is not really a good thing. At least for me, it hasn't been for all the stuff that we're trying to order. But at the same point, we haven't really been able to dive into it really deeply. And so I think today on Confab, what we want to do is just experiment a little bit with this, because during the
Yep.
learning, I think we discovered that there are multiple paths that you could go down. And when we start talking about ERP systems, it's like, well, do I have this integrated as part of it? Do I need to have this integrated as part of it? What's my strategy? Because these devices now are becoming so cheap, but there's so much information that they can convey back to you to be able to address then. An example would be filters. You have a filtration system in your water line for whatever product that you're potentially producing, and typically what's happening more and more is you've got hardware vendors that are treating hardware like a service, so hardware as a service as opposed to software as a service. And it's been a concept that's been out there for a while, right? Leasing of equipment has always been there. But the interesting thing about it is that you can take this data and then save money with it. More specifically, filtration. You would set up a regular scheduled, maintenance event every 6 months to go through and then replace that filter. Well, it may not be time to replace it. It may have not had the CFM or the movement of water through the filtration elements to make it so that it's not. So that it basically needs to be replaced. It could be another 3 months that you could replace them. So I guess what we want to do is really kind of show those concepts, right? And just discuss that a little bit more. And hopefully you guys have lots of questions. And yeah, it looks like Herb was saying my electric meter sends info via power lines to the main office. I use that actually. That's interesting. I got the power line adapters for my internet too in my house. So that would make sense. Doesn't have to be high speed bitrate to do that, right? All right, guys, so we just jump in, start going through some of the stuff, and have some fun with this? Let's do it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for everyone. There we go. Look at that. Beautiful black screen. I'm going to go ahead and open up our browser. And so today what we want to do is we want to talk about two different concepts that we see many of the prospects and customers using when it comes to IoT integration. So when we're saying IoT, we're talking about Internet of Things. That is a device that you've installed in a refrigerator, and a microwave, and heavy machinery, and an extruder, and all these different types of devices that is tracking that sensory information, and basically providing that information back to you so that you can choose to have an event or something occur off of it. And probably the hardest part of this entire thing is the first step, which is, what do I use as an IoT platform to really start communicating this information? And an example of that is, do I just create a SQL database and I make an Azure SQL database and I create a platform where I then have devices that use complex libraries installed with them to go ahead and then upload this data to a SQL database, and then I use that information to do something with it? And there are a bunch of companies out there that have tackled it in this fashion. I went to now a new customer of ours that did IoT with a lot of the equipment that they had. So they were in the agricultural market, more towards poultry, turkeys, and different types of birds of that nature. And they're expanding as well. But what they told me is that they've had some way to connect these devices to send this telemetry data back to them before even IoT Central or the tools that we're going to look at even existed. And I thought that was a really cool thing to see, that this technology isn't what I would classify really as bleeding edge anymore. It's more of that it's become more mainstream, or enough where it can be integrated into a platform like what Microsoft has with either the connected field service or with the IoT Central that we're going to share with this. I don't know, Marcus or Adam, have you guys had any other customers that you've worked with as well that have talked about these concepts?
I have, I have, with respect to manufacturing. So on production lines, when you think about the value add of the benefit of like proactive device monitoring. So not just how you internally operate, how we can reduce costs, instead of bottlenecking a break on our main production line or lines with something we weren't expecting, and then scrambling to, in a reactive way, go and make those fixes, make those changes, go throw down whatever cost it's going to take to get that fixed. You can then actually anticipate, you can measure, you can calculate when in a range, or with some actual data-driven decision making, when those breaks are going to happen, when preventative maintenance needs to happen. There's going to be improved safety depending on your device type, depending some of the risks, the behaviors, the machinations of your production lines. This can actually impact humans. This can impact safety. This can impact the day-to-day operations of your business. Now that's internal operations. Externally, you think about the new support model. In fact, I think Satya brought this up at what was that last big conference? Was it Ignite, or was
Ignite,
it?
I think is your Ignite or Inspire, right? One of the
Yeah,
two.
Inspire maybe. But the service model is changing. So for organizations that do lease or sell or maintain and service assets and equipment, understanding when these things might see issues, when end of life, the end of life for these devices might occur. Think about how important and how valuable that would be to set up preventative maintenance schedules for your service teams, your field service teams. So instead of having that same thing happen to a bottleneck, a break, safety, all that for your own internal operations, for your customers, how value adding of a process or a system, that preventative model would be to be able to be ahead of that instead of the reactionary model for customer service. So a couple of manufacturing customers of mine have voiced this. We have not implemented for one of them, so it's on the roadmap, but that it's being discussed and that the value is really being propped up is really awesome.
Yeah, I worked with a mining company, and so what they did is they set up on the conveyor systems after the product had been, goes through whatever process it's going through. So they use it for measurement tracking to know what sort of output was being captured.
Yeah, and like Rad said, like beat processing. I agree, Mr. Wagner.
Oh, there you go.
Exactly. I mean, there's just tons of different options that are out there, and I guess from my point of view, and I'd just like to challenge people on this a little bit too, and just say, why wouldn't you want to have this data? I mean, there are things that you need to think about, obviously, beyond what we're showing for the technology today. We're technology geeks. We like to focus on the technical aspect of it. We're not talking about the licensing because, I mean, obviously there is a cost that's related to this, but that data for the preventative maintenance that you were talking about, Adam, from processing for efficiency gains, for understanding what your products are actually doing. We've talked about the theme around Confab is continually bin data, right? So the more data that we have, the more telemetry information you have from your devices, the better products you're potentially going to have. Now, obviously, you just don't want to collect data for the sake of collecting data. You have to have some type of measure or impact with it. But that's a really big thing to think about with this. So I guess let's start going through this a little bit. First off, let's approach this from the perspective of you don't have Dynamics 365. And I really want to approach it in this fashion because for some of you, connected field service or field service itself, there's a challenge out there right now on how big of an organization you need to be to really implement that technology set. And I think that that's going to change over time. But at the same point, remember, you need to have Dynamics 365 already implemented to be able to use then that connected field service technology. And in Confab, we've really prided ourselves, if that's the right way to say it, in being kind of agnostic with this. Like, let's talk about the technology, but we like to relate it back to where our wheelhouse is, which is more in the Microsoft stack. Because there are competitive solutions that are out there as well, but if you're using Microsoft, like for me on this, I spent a couple hours going through and doing the setup related to it. Because I lived in the Microsoft realm, I understood Azure, the resource pools that are set up with it, or the resource groups, all the different elements in Azure that are set up with it, and it made it so much easier as opposed to learning a whole new set of technology. So let's say you're not Microsoft as well. What I want to show you today is just how can I set up some type of a sample application even, and I can then connect devices in the future if I want to drive that. But basically just set up an IoT central type setup, and that's what we typically use to then connect where we're not using Dynamics 365. We need a hub or we need an area to be able to collect all these different types of events that are occurring from our devices that are sending telemetry data back, and we also may need to send telemetry or responses to them as well as part of that process. So I guess the big thing today is let's go through and take a look at that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into IoT Central. And you can see I've been searching for IoT quite a bit today. This is obviously kind of the first place to start within Dynamics, not in Dynamics, but within IoT itself for this process. And what we're really looking at here is that if you don't have Dynamics 365, this is the path you should start looking at. And if you have Dynamics 365, this is also a path you should consider, especially if you're on Business Central, for example, because that connectivity between Connected Field Service and Business Central really isn't fully vetted yet. It's not there yet, truthfully. So they're continually making improvements with that. But with, for example, finance and supply chain, we already have some of those native integrations then with field service through the data integrator and the common data service to really drive that, and Business Central is getting there. But let's show how you could use this tool then to really drive that. So a couple of things that you can do inside of here. First off is when you're on IoT, Azure IoT Central, basically what you want to do is you want to build a solution. I'm going to move this over.
Picture.
Yeah, yep, exactly. The build a solution button that's right here. So I'm going to take my window and just resize it a little bit for us because I don't need the full screen real estate for it. But what I can do is I can go ahead and click on build a solution here. And basically what happens is it brings me into IoT Central. And you can see apps.azure.iotcentral.com. There's a whole hub for this that you basically set up and maintain to be able to drive that communication component and the rules and all the devices that are needed to be able to really manage this. So if we take a look at this just really quickly, we can see they've got some videos for it, and quite commonly the videos are very marketing centric. They're showing you how awesome it is that you can just click on a couple buttons and it works. And it's close.
Naturally.
Yeah, exactly. It's close, but there's some improvement there, right? So the point, though, is that with an IoT Central device, what we can do is we can start using more of this Power Platform. That's been a common theme in Confab, right? We've got ERP and all the business processes that that are in there, but we also then need to have additional capabilities as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the build portion of this to really start creating then an actual application, what we'll call an IoT central application to manage devices. And so if I click on my build, for example, here, there are a bunch of examples that are already pre-baked inside of Azure IoT. More specifically, you've got some examples here. So if you take a look at these applications, connected logistics, distributed digital distribution, for a center with it, micro fulfillment center, all these different types of what I would classify as templates that are samples. And so this is a really good way to start understanding how different businesses are using this. But if you're like me, you like to just create custom apps because that's the way you should do it, right? And get into the details with it. So creating a new application is pretty simple. So I can say, for example, Confab dev is what I could call my application name that's related to it. I could select a template that's related to it as well. And let's talk about this a little bit. So what we're doing is we're building a workspace to manage our IoT devices so that we can create rules and jobs and different types of events that can occur with it. The template is what drives then the functionality that's available inside of that particular app or the IoT central application that we're interacting with. And by default, you have custom application. There's also custom application legacy. One thing to note, if you are playing around with this and you want to use Flow to create rules that use Microsoft Power Automate, right now, in my environment at least, and it may be different, there may be other preview settings that are there, you have to select the custom application legacy to be able to use that. Otherwise, you'll have to use webhooks, which is totally valid as well, but webhooks are a little bit more technical in terms of how you do that setup then related to it. We're going to do, we have one already set up in here, so I'm going to just do legacy as part of it. And then you have your pricing plan with it. So for devices that are sending data every couple minutes, obviously there's a standard 2, there's a standard 1, and then there's a free trial as well. If you use the standard options, this will actually create an IoT central application inside of your Azure Active Directory. So if I go to free, for example, I don't need to put in all my additional information regarding what environment or Azure subscription I'm going to add this to. So what we'll do, because we like to try it with real things, we're going to do it to the sales subscription. Sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to increase our budget. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on the create button to go ahead and create this particular...
You're not sorry.
I know, I love this stuff. This is so much fun. Sorry, I'm not sorry, Dave. How's that better? So, yeah, and as you were saying, Mr. Wagner, levels the playing field. Smaller players have access to technologies that once were only available to the major leaguers, and that's absolutely correct. I mean, this IoT Central, you can be a small business and basically use this to start collecting data. And maybe you just collect data to start here, and then eventually you integrate it. But at least you've got a place to start storing that data repository as part of it.
And that's, that is summing up the same message that Microsoft has been putting out really with all, well, most of their stack right now, in particular with the Power Platform, no code, low code, or fewer, less code, more power, fewer clicks, more power. This is democratizing. This is getting it into the lay person or the business driver, not traditionally or historically the hardcore developers or the coders. So it's the entry point and the ease of adoption and understanding some of the key concepts and getting your hands dirty with not just IoT setups, but you think about how the Azure Bot framework is now, we now have Power Virtual Agents to spin up homegrown apps. So the accessibility is just throttled open. It's great.
Oh, it's huge. And I mean, here's the thing about it too. We talk about simplification with it. There's still the super complex capabilities that you can use as well. If you want to use Azure Service Bus, if you want to use Azure Logic Apps, if you want to create your own custom application that this information then when a rule occurs, for example, it goes to your on-prem database. You can do that, right? I mean,
coders, we still need you.
Exactly.
We said it last time for portal development.
Yeah.
We it's the paradigm is shifting, but there's not any less importance for the skill set. It's just there are new frameworks, there are new development layers. So to really get full enterprise end-to-end solutions, that skill set will definitely still be needed for a lot of this stuff.
Absolutely. And so what we can do here now, we've just created the Confab dev. What I want to do is I just want to show, for example, how do you kind of get this going from here? So, and I'm going to show both perspectives as well. So we're going to do this in the legacy custom application, and then we're going to use it with the new custom application, because I'm positive they're going to add flow back, or at least have that capability inside of there.
Yep.
It just might be that in my preview events, I don't have the right setup related to it, right? So that's kind of what typically happens in this. So kind of the first area that you go to, so now you have basically a site to start gathering data from your devices, and your devices are basically set up with device templates. So this is kind of the first area that you go into to start setting up what are the types of devices that you have. And what you can do is you can go to your device templates, you can click on your add up here to create a new template, and then here are, for example, the different types of device templates that you could use with this legacy solution. And I want to show one other thing too, so I'm going to go ahead and open this in a new window if I can. And I'm going to go into, as you can see, guys, I've been playing a little bit with this. I've got a couple of different ones that I've set up with it. But in this one, so this is the newer version of it. So this is not the legacy one. If I do a new one here, you can see that there are a bunch of new pre-configured templates for different types of devices that you can now use to integrate your solutions with these devices to relay that information. And I guess the real big thing here is that, I've got a Raspberry Pi. I've got a Raspberry Pi 2 that runs Windows 10 IoT Core. I mean, you can create these applications then that are monitoring any sensory data that you have on there. So, I mean, it's a little device that may cost $20 in your manufacturing process, but if you think about it, and there's the R&D investment, I understand that as well, but if you're selling a $1,000 machine to be able to get that data to you as part of your servicing offerings, to be able to be proactive with your devices if they're showing
Huge.
hardware failures, I mean, that would be awesome to be a partner and be able to get to that information really quickly. So I'm going to just do an MX chip just to show. So right here I've got a template that I assign for it. I create that to provision it. And in this portal, what it's doing is it's going to go through and basically generate a sample device. So now that I created my device templates, if I go to my devices here, you can see that it's actually set up as a simulated device. Now, we don't have any hardware devices to connect right now, but if you wanted to add a physical hardware device, you would click on the plus here, you would do the real device with it. There's some certificates and some device IDs that you set up then on IoT Core, so that when it connects to the internet, so it connects to the IP address that's assigned to it, it then goes out to the internet, and then it uses a device ID and basically a symmetric key to basically then connect to this instance and then broadcast all of its sensory data that it has to provide that information. But in the demo here, we can just play around with these simulated devices to show what that connectivity can then do as kind of the next steps as you go through this. So the example of that, let's go ahead and take a look at this device, and we can see now that we're actually getting some telemetry data from this device. So we've got accelerometer information, humidity information, pressure, temperature. We can even have location information, so where your device is. If you have a GPS chip that's installed, it could theoretically get GPS or coordinate information, or you could use the IP address for some, close to GPS type coordinates as part of that. So that's part of the device setup that really drives that. I want to go into, let's go into a different tab here, because I've got one that I've had up for a couple hours now, and I think I called it Confab Legacy. So if I go to my devices in here and we take a look at this simulated device, so here's then some of the measures that are coming back through this simulated device that it's showing all the detail related to it. So I can see if I wanted to get to a more detailed breakout of all the values that are being sent over, all the device states that are related to it. You can see that even there were some states where it said danger. So this is sample data, obviously, that's being generated with it. But the point here is that this data is is basically coming from the device into IoT Central here to be able to then do something with it. And to do something with it, typically what happens is you're going to be going to your device templates, for example, selecting that template, and then designing rules related to these templates to really drive that. So we have our device, we've connected our device, we have telemetry data that's being sent from the device. Obviously, for a real device, you would do some setup on the device. You would install either IoT Core, or you would buy one of those plug and play devices right here that will automatically then connect with a simple setup to IoT Central with it. But then what you're going to do is you're going to go to your rules, and you're going to create new rules that are related to this. And so I've got one here that we'll take a look at in a second, but I want to generate a new rule inside of here, and I want to have a telemetry or telemetry data that I want to send to an external system, to any system that's out there, and I want to stress that, to any system. So if I go ahead and I say I want to create a new telemetry type rule, and I'm going to call this a pressure change rule that's going to happen, or a pressure change. I can go ahead and say for conditions, I can say on my measurement, when my pressure, as you can see here, it shows a nice graph to show me what the averages of the pressure has been for this particular device. But when I have a pressure reading that is above 397, so I can say select an operator that's greater than 357 as part of it. You can see it's pretty much all the time it's above it, right? So I could say, 500, 600, or 5006. It's just really nice, as you can see here. It's kind of showing you what you've had for that data aggregation that's related to it. And if you want to aggregate it, you can do that as well. So there's some aggregation functions that are inside of here. But what I can do then is I can save that. So great, I've all of a sudden created a telemetry rule saying when the pressure is greater than 600, let's add an action and let's send an email, right? Very simple. Very, very simple. You've just now enabled IoT that sends you an email for your devices. You could have a shared inbox, the old classical model of on Exchange, create a shared inbox, create an email alias for it. Anytime that a device goes through and exceeds that particular threshold that you've set up, an email would be sent to you. You could have that email pop up on your phone. I mean, this is like the most classical way of being notified that a device is exceeding some type of threshold, right?
All company.
I know. Yeah, exactly. All at stoneridgesoftware.com.
Reply all, forward, reply all.
Yeah, with serial numbers, right? So, anyways, so in our email here, I'm just going to click on it and just show. You can see the pressure value. Like it's a nicely formatted email that if you have other tools that you want to use to then take this email and do something with it, you can do that, right? So that's the first step here, is the easy to use email capability. The other aspect of this, I'm going to go ahead and delete the action. Let's look at a different one. We can use a webhook that's related to it. And basically, what a webhook is that when the event fires, it sends out basically an event to a server that's listening for this action or event to occur, or technically it's telemetry data that we're sending with it. And we call it webhook 1, for example. And there's if I remember correctly, there's a request bin site, if I remember, that you can, for example, if you want to see what it's saying, this is a really nice tool to have. It inspects any type of HTTP post command or statement that you may have from a system, and it's pretty much product agnostic, so it's really handy. An example of it, I can create a request bin here. I can copy this string then inside of here, and then I can go to my rule and I can say, hey, when that event occurs, send it to this particular address. And basically, I'm going to go ahead and save this so while we're talking we can see what happens. Anytime that occurs on this site, I'll be able to see then what the data was that it sent as part of it. So that way, if I want to create a .NET application that has an endpoint that is listening for basically an HTTP post command that's going to come to it, you can use that then to drive that, to really then have that data displayed as part of it. So another simple way to do it. Another way, though, too, let's keep on going because we've got more. This is more of the now we're getting into the realm of, you know what, Scott, this is all great. Like the emails can tell me what's going on, but I need this in Business Central. I need this to have something that pops up in Business Central because I don't have Dynamics 365 field service. I'm going to implement it eventually, but I just need to have some service orders that are generated off of it right now. So what I could do is I could go into my actions here, and if I go down just a little bit further, I should have, as you can see here, Microsoft Flow inside of here as well. Right? Clap, 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 clap. Adam's clapping, but on mute. So as you can see, there's also other ones in here. So Azure Functions, so if you want to use code, for example, for some more complexity, Azure Functions or Logic Apps could also be used.
Logic apps.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So
Sorry,
they're
I just clapping for a number of buckets here. Like just the extensibility and what you can actually hook into is awesome. So I have a couple of customers who are using these web apps, these Logic apps in Azure to offload like synchronous processing or some of that async processing rather. So to have the bucket be that diverse in what you can use those tools, those handshakes is really fun.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, over here, a comment. Yeah, schedule a service request to have it replaced. Yeah, you could do lots of things. And if you're doing a transaction count, you could send a billing transaction through. You could do preventative maintenance. Yeah, you could hit anything really in your system.
And you can figure out, so licensing, let's talk about that for a second, because telemetry data, is usually a specific event, right, that's coming through with it. But why couldn't you take a bunch of events on your device, base 64 encode them, and then send 20 events in one type of telemetry data event? So you don't, you can use it where you have individual fields and then worry about the transactional cost with it. But at the same point, you could go even further. You could install a type of a database. It could be SQL Server. It could be any of the other type, Postgres, any of those other types of databases that are out there, and have that aggregate the information on the device and then send it out. Or even like Marcus was saying, if you had a device that required help, you could actually have a button. How cool would that be? It's called the Easy button, right? Amazon invented it a long time ago. Just kidding, it was Staples, right? But anyways, or was it Staples or was it Office?
Yeah, it was Staples.
Okay. But you could go ahead and press that on your device, and that would be an indicator that a human being feels that there's a problem with the device, and that could create a work order inside of your system to have somebody dispatched to take a look at it, or at least to call them off of it. Maybe not even off of telemetry data, but just off of a button that could be pressed to provide that feedback. And we can do that now. So let's go and take a look at it from Flow's perspective here. So in Flow, what I can do is I can actually create a new flow related then to this particular device. So what I can do is I can create an automated from blank is usually what I start with on here. I usually skip this step. You can go ahead and type in your flow name. I'll do Confab Dev IoT Demo.
Scott, do you know if there are IoT specific? I actually have not checked into the templates that are available. Are there IoT specific templates that are in there, or is that what it serves up right away?
There are. No, it doesn't serve it up right away, but there are. So if I do IoT Central for the rule, if I remember correctly, when a rule is fired, there it is. So there are a bunch of templates that are out there too. So this is obviously the action, right, that's occurring with it. But there are also templates. I'll cancel that real quick. I don't know if it filters. So IoT Central we'll do as an example. Of course.
Yeah, you might not have a template for it.
Yeah, I don't have a template set up for it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and actually let's do that because, we've talked about, so Flow, Microsoft Flow, Automate is what it's called now, right? But they still, as you can see. Let's go ahead and take a look at the flow. So if you create a flow and you look for a template with it inside of here, I'm pretty sure IoT Central was one of the templates. So they've got custom action. So this is where we're getting into. We'll get into this conversation a little bit here today as well. Create Dynamics 365 alerts from IoT Central, or when a technician is booked or when a device is created in Dynamics 365, update IoT Central. Because remember, right now we're looking at it from a perspective where you don't have Dynamics 365, but if you implement it, you may still have legacy in IoT Central, or maybe you're using IoT Central because it has expanded capabilities for the devices that it supports. but you want to be able to maintain devices inside of Dynamics 365 because you're taking that asset and relating it then potentially to a customer. And in IoT Central, when we're looking at it, we're not really relating it to any customer. We're basically relating it to the device and more of the hardware level perspective of the device as we go through that process. So there are a
I
bunch
just
in
wanted
here.
to throw it out there. And actually, we did a Stoneridge Connect last week, and I did a Power Automate session, and I threw out to the audience that templates are, for me anyway, I love starting from a template just to learn the ins and outs of how these different endpoints and how these applications and how these databases work together, like the different calls you can make, what you can do. People have already done some work in structuring. A lot of these are Microsoft built, or all of them, but but there is a whole community out there, so people have done this before. Getting started from a template instead of going in on a blank slate, blank canvas, and trying to piece together everything yourself, that's awesome. That's great, and I tend to do that from time to time too. But for Power Automate specifically, it's really fun to see how these templates are structured to get a leg up on what you might be able to use and port over to your own flows.
Perfect timing as well. So as we've been talking, remember how we set up that one rule from the request bin? Basically what I did is I went to requestbin.net, and you have your history on the far right here that's being maintained. When I click on this now, you can see that I've had that rule fire, the pressure change rule, as you can see, because our rule from that device actually occurred. So you imagine this. This is just the telemetry data that's coming from that device, and I just set it up to have this endpoint with it. Imagine you had a different type of an endpoint, right, that you want to programmatically control. This is how you could theoretically then do that. But with Flow makes it more of an end user type perspective, right? So, or more of a visual perspective to be able to go through and do this. And typically what happens within a Flow, I'll just do an email as well with this one, because you could do an email or even Business Central. We'll call it Confab Dev IoT example, and we'll skip the trigger, because what I want to do is I want to go into here and I want to look at, for example, let's do IoT Central. Okay, and so here is our Azure IoT Central, and I'm going to click on it just to see what happens here when a rule is fired. So remember, inside of here, we've generated that rule, and basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to now connect this. And so what I can do is I can say when a rule is fired, and when it's using the confab dev, so obviously I've got another one that I've set up just in case for the stream, so that way we could look at it if this didn't work. But if I click on confab dev here, and I go ahead and look up the rule that's related to it, you can see I haven't saved the rule, it looks like, at this point. So let's go ahead and pretend like we're in confab dev and go to legacy. You can see, and actually I did do it in legacy, I'm sorry. So pressure change was the new rule that we've been interacting with. So I can go ahead and select that. So when this rule is fired for this IoT application that we've set up on IoT Central and that rule, what I can do is I can add a new step. And here is where the world just opens to whatever you want. So examples of that. Let's say I want to integrate it with Business Central. I can type in Business Central inside of here. I can select the on-premise connector if I wanted to, or I can select the other online version. I can create a record as part of this. I can select what environment I want to do this in. I can select the company name, for example, so in our Stoneridge demo company, and then any of the tables that are exposed inside of here, all the APIs. If I wanted to create a sales invoice or an order or data related to it, I could access it through this then to create Business Central records. I could also have this same flow do the same thing through an email. So I can select, for example, an email as an action as well. So that way, when I send an email, we can see it'll send an email first and then send and create a connector inside of here to drive that. And if I really want to go even further, I could even add a different step. I could say, you know what, I want it to go to my request bin because I want to see the data that comes with it as well. So you can actually go to HTTP request, I think is what it's called, or HTTP, and basically select that request, invoke a request, and then paste in that particular string inside of here that we had that was generated for the HTTP requests to then broadcast that as well as part of it. So like, I just wanted to just highlight this because it integrates with Flow. any of the different types of endpoints that are there. If you wanted to send a text message to you or to your consultants, or if you wanted to, like we'll do just steps. I mean, if you wanted to update a
Teams,
record,
SharePoint.
Teams, and that's what they've used it for. So Teams, as
Yeah.
an example, you can have it post to a channel inside of Teams that then is being maintained by your team, that's your service team, to be able to get to this information. So I want to stop there. Marcus, Adam, what do you guys think of that? I think it's phenomenal, but
I think
I might be
it's
prejudiced.
amazing. It's back to the comment earlier that this is now allowing your small and medium sized business to tap into this technology like just wasn't possible before.
Yeah.
There's that, and then I keep thinking of when we extend and extend, if we push this data to say like Azure Blob Storage and using some of the analytics and machine learning capabilities that we have on that end of it, you really think about a full ecosystem of data analysis. Scott, earlier you made the comment that there's just so much data that we can pull, and that's great to be able to either push that into Blob Storage or create records, do what we have to do, but you can still be shout out to Karen yesterday if you're watching, but data rich, information poor. So being able to tap into these additional analysis tools and take not just your IoT outputs but customer data and everything else. I know we're not there quite yet, but you're telling a compelling story and you're feeding. You're feeding into the proactive service model, you're feeding into the preventative maintenance model, you're feeding so much into what you can do for your organization, whether you're full enterprise or SMB.
And I wanted to highlight that too. I was thinking where it was. Adam, like you were saying, look at this. You can hook up your blob storage. You can hook up Service Bus to this.
Or Service Bus or any
event
subscription.
hubs.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep. So I mean, if you
And that's what
Yep, go
that's
ahead,
what the demo was with Ignite, correct? Weren't they showing a vehicle tracking? So this is the back end of that demo that Satya did.
Correct. That's where they had the telemetry information from millions of vehicles that was being sent over to this. They also used the SQL Server, I think, was the other perspective with this, an Azure SQL Server.
And on-prem, they're doing the connected, connected edge. So you can have the hybrid on-prem, online, or cloud-hosted model. So just being able to monitor top-down 10,000-foot view of your entire enterprise, regardless of where and how the data lives. That was really cool to see.
And that is a really good point, because in some of these, this is simulated at this point, but you can actually set it up where you can have an edge device that is maintained. So basically, you install an edge device at the customer location, and then all of your little devices connect to that edge device, and then the edge device does the communication back to IoT Central with it. So there are scalability capabilities that you can have, so that you can centrally, maybe it's a service that you provide that they install an edge device that then all the devices connect to then send that telemetry information to you. That's also another option that we have with this as well. So kind of the last areas then. So obviously we've talked about the devices, we've shown the telemetry information that's coming through. Maybe I've gotten some emails with it, and so I wanted to show. Look at this.
I was just gonna ask if you wanted to pull your inbox up to.
I gotta
to
be
show
careful because I don't want to share everything on in the world on this. But you can see I've had this running for a little while, and I've got quite a bit of messages that have been generated from it. So the sky is falling device MX chip simulated issued an alert with the temperature has changed. So I mean, this is just an example in the one that I have. So if and actually it's not full screen even, right? So there it is, you can see the alert. But inside of here, when I did the initial rule that was related to it, so if I go to my device templates, I click on my MX chip, go to my rules, and look at my temperature change, I had a flow set up inside of here already, and if I go ahead and take a look at that flow, we can see it has been running and running and running. But if I edit it, I just did a concept of when a rule is fired, send an email notification, and basically the device ID and all that detail is inside of here. So
But
Just a
what's cool is you can structure these heuristics, these rules to escalate too. So you can set multiple thresholds. You can look at temperature ranges,
you can do
or
combinations. Yeah.
yeah, you can mash these together, and you can marry up multiple data points to be able to scale severity. So if you're actually looking at severity models, and it's good to know, hey, we're kind of peaking here and there, we're kind of valleying here and there, but if something's really wrong, then you can make that go and do push notifications. You can get that to director level. We can do a number of things if you have a specific like SLA or severity model in place.
Yep. And let's go one step further now with it. So obviously this gets you, I think, a lot of people that are on the stream today, this gets you probably light years ahead in a lot of ways. Not all of you. I know some of you are going to be requiring more advanced capabilities, and that might be more of what you start talking with our team more about, Azure Service Bus and some of those technologies that are there. But let's bring it now to a dynamics type theme that's related to it. So we've got this connected capability as well. We have a solution called Connected Field Service, right, that allows for us to basically do kind of a very similar perspective as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly log in here, go through my wonderful multi-factor authentication and approve it away. And I have an environment that I set up for this demonstration to go over some of the details then related to this. And as you can see, I'm getting lots of notifications, but we're going to go to my SRF IoT trial instance that I went ahead and set up. Click on that and then go ahead and just open up the environment. So this is where maybe you already have Dynamics 365, and in Dynamics 365 you already have two things really primarily installed: connected field service and then field service. Because if I remember correctly, this is a different solution, right, that you add to Dynamics 365 for connected field
Correct.
service.
That's
Yep.
a dedicated app for setting up your provider and going through the actual connection and the hardcore settings for your devices.
Okay, cool. And so connected field service is typically what we then use from a Dynamics 365 perspective to start managing devices and start managing all those different types of measurements and that telemetry information. And the one thing I want to stress right now for you, just to not get confused with, is that this is not IoT Central. So connected field service is its own type of entity. It creates its own structure in the back end. There's basically two competing Microsoft technologies for this right now. If you have Dynamics, typically you'd use connected field service, but if you don't have Dynamics, you'd use IoT Central. So, and if you're looking at using IoT Central with Business Central, that would be another solution that we would have at this point, because this doesn't fully integrate yet with Business Central.
And the experiences are they're gonna like, you go into connected field service, if you've gone in and set up provider for like webinar integration and D365 marketing, you're gonna have the same look and feel and experience that you would in these applications. Azure, the IoT Central, much more open-ended. You're gonna have the Azure portal or some of those Azure experiences in the user experience.
Yep. It's company centric. It's more corporate centric for this, meaning that you probably have an Azure subscription. There's a whole structure behind that, and I want to highlight that. So what I mean is that when you go into your settings for the setup of this, and you actually connect to it, there's a site that you go to that generates this default IoT provider instance that we have. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to portal.azure.com. And then there's also one other link that I've got to open that I saved that we can get to. Looking around my desk to see if I can find it. There it is. So when you do the setup of this, when you go into your connected field service, basically you have to go to a site called the IoT deployment tool to really drive this. And what you do throughout this process is you check mark that you agree to making changes to the Dynamics 365 organization. You select what organization it is, and then what you do is you click next, and then you set up the resource groups that are related to it and all the additional information that's related to it. And you can see here that I can do an upgrade for the deployment or a new deployment, and I select my Azure subscription. And what this does in the background is that it actually goes through and deploys all the necessary tools to be able to use connected field service within Dynamics 365. So what does that mean? So if I go into my SRF IoT-IoT, I think is what I called it, resource group right here, when I click on the finish here, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to screw anything up, what it does is it runs through this whole deployment process of creating API connections, of using the common data service connector, because remember, we're storing device data and registration of device and customer assets in Dynamics 365, and we're then deploying that obviously into Azure. And basically it creates all of these different types of entities inside of your Azure instance. And kind of the key ones to note here is this IoT hub. This is where you're connecting all of your devices to. And then from there, you may have app services that have service plans that are related to them that are then the actual IoT devices themselves. So when we look at this, I want to go ahead and just look at this simulation that we have, which is pretty cool. Basically inside of here, if I go ahead and open this in a new tab, I have an example of a thermostat that we can use to create or generate events that are related to it. And basically, as part of the deployment tool that we are looking at here, it deploys this sample app for you to use. And what you're doing is you're saying what is the actual host or the IoT resource that you connect to, which is that hub that we are looking at inside of here. So if I go back into my resource group, it's this hub that's related to it. And what you're doing is you're setting up the device to connect through a policy and then a specific key to basically authenticate with it. And what typically happens here then is that you actually have it connect to a device that's related to it. And that device, if I go back into my settings here and we go back into our connected field service and take a look at our devices here, I should see that I have an IoT device that, look at that, it's connected right now as well. And if I click on that device to take a look at it, we can see the device information or the properties that are related to it are actually being displayed on here. And also I can see I don't have this attached to a particular account at this point. So it's not assigned, it's a device that basically went online, that was registered, but isn't connected to a specific account at this point. And so the cool thing about this, as you can see in the background here, is that we've got some information that's being sent over to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the temperature to a certain temperature rating, and we should see that a status event is eventually going to populate here saying that the temperature is now at 98 degrees. And what it's doing, just to follow the chain, is that this is the device. It's periodically sending information through telemetry, because that changed. It connects to the IoT hub right here. The IoT hub has a device that's related to it. So if I go to my IoT devices right here, I should be able to see 3 different devices that are related to it. So here's my Therm 003 that's inside of here. And then what's happening is it's connecting into field service to send that telemetry information. And there are a bunch of different alerts that are set up inside of this environment that allow for me then to see when something changes inside of Dynamics 365 for that device. Now, when we first logged in here, you didn't see any type of IoT alert, but because we've changed the temperature on there, we now have an IoT alert that occurred. And if I go ahead and take a look at the alerts that are related to it, temperature reading of 98 degrees exceeded a threshold of 70. So we actually had some rules that are already pre-set up for this that then pull in that alert data. And as you can see here, here's the beautiful thing. If you decide to use connected field service, you can now do a whole business process around this. So you can now create a case related to it. You can go ahead and create a work order. You can schedule and dispatch the work order. You can have all the different types of readings that are inside of here. So this is the example of a device connecting then to Dynamics 365, not through IoT Central, but through connected field service, to then have rules and different types of alerts that basically can then drive a business process to create cases and work orders and all that additional information.
And it's important to like, this is so awesome in terms of automation and like the future of proactive service models. This is incredible. One thing to point out here though is Scott mentioned silver bullet, the easy button earlier. This is where you're going to have to get removed from the easy button thinking here.
Yes.
If you have thousands and hundreds of thousands of devices, can you imagine the data load that you're going to be looking at when you go into IoT alerts? So you're not going to be able to manage each and every one of these in this fashion. So going in and starting off a work order process or a customer service process pointedly, I think that would be a little remiss. So, this is where, from a people process perspective, like what are those thresholds and those metrics and those KPIs that you really do care about when it gets pretty critical to really manage in a smart way? There will have to be some front end thought to when do we pick this up and run with it from a process perspective. There's going to be a lot of data in there if you're plugging into a lot of field devices. So just be mindful of the fact that this is awesome, this is incredible, and it's very, it's for all intents and purposes easy to jump into and start running with. But from a process perspective, what makes sense, whether you're an SMB organization all the way up to Fortune 100s, you're going to have to really think about how to structure this.
Yeah, how do you view it? How do you display the alerts? Because if you get 1,000 alerts, how do you manage that? The other aspect of it too, though, is remember you still do have the ability to then use the connected field service flow templates inside of here as well. So we were showing from IoT Central that you could create flow-based or automate-based events that then email and do all that additional information. Well, because this is coming into Dynamics 365, we've always had that Power Automate integration. You can also then go a step further. You can have it come into Dynamics 365 and then send emails or notifications or additional information for it as well. So yeah, Brad, sorry for too many chats. No worries at all. It's glad that you're able to go through and talk. One last comment, push messages to the device that will address the event. Add Ollie to bearing when temperatures, absolutely. So an example that they give is actually sending a command. And right here, as you can see, inside of Dynamics 365, you have to set these up. But when you do the send command, what you can do is you can define what a command is, like reboot the device. And once you've defined that command and set the parameters related to it and send it, basically the message would then be received over here as part of that transaction, and it could reboot the device, or you could turn on a fan, or you could lower the flow rate, or you could, the list goes on and on and on, depending upon how much automation and control that you add to it. So that is an absolute feature inside of here as well. And like we said, if you're using IoT Central, don't be scared you have to go to this level immediately. You can use IoT Central, and in IoT Central you can send commands, and if you implement this with your devices that are on IoT Central, you can send commands to IoT Central that then go to the device as well. And so that allows you for you to then migrate slowly over to more of a connected field service perspective, as opposed to using then the IoT Central to tackle that. So it just varies based on where you are in your life cycle with this technology at this point.
At its highest level, this is such a compelling story. You think about at the very front end, so you've got your devices, you've got hardware, you've got equipment, maybe they've got a barcode on there. So developing a barcode scanning custom canvas app or a model-driven app that people can use on floors in warehouses to catalog not just what's going out on trucks, what's going to be sent out, what's going to be leased, but pulling in and tacking that onto a specific customer. So down the chain, we now have that device that's going in out in being installed, so we can manage our fleet, we can manage the routes in field service. Those can get deployed, and we can schedule that deployment, we can schedule that install on site, knowing where it is exactly geographically. Those are going to get up and running. We can in an automated fashion bring in all of that device or most of that. There probably will be some caveats and asterisks here and there, but bring in the device information to set that up in an automated way, using flow, using hooks, using some customization and extension to set that up for us. We manage those, we monitor those, and then on the back end, either pushing all of that data in aggregate or averages, whatever, what Scott brought up a few minutes ago, to analyze and to understand what we have in the field. And when we're looking at proactive service models, when we're looking at the consumption of that data and issues that might arise on those peaks and valleys and the measurements of the data inputs, looking at what we can do as a service in our service model right here is just end to end. This is really, really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. And Brad Wagner, like you said, the printing of devices, I mean, you could absolutely, I mean, you could have it when a printer does something, it fires an event that goes to IoT Central that then gets relayed over to basically then either connected field service or to IoT Central, and you actually have it direct somewhere else. So yeah, I mean, one thing I wanted to highlight, I kind of flipped the screen because I know we're getting close on time here, but as well, remember Power BI now too. I didn't enable it in my demo environment because I just wanted to fight through kind of the connected field service capabilities. But if you wanted to, during the setup, when you're defining it for your IoT deployment, you actually go through and then say, hey, I would like to use Power BI or repository for this data, for the stream analytics is what we call it. So that way then that data that you have inside of your environment can also be shown from a Power BI perspective. So, it's kind of up to you guys on how you want to use it. I've played with it a little bit using my Hackberry A10, which is a 5-year-old device that sends information via Flow or even via Automate to get to that. So, like I said, it's just something I think that people should start really considering, because that telemetry data, even internal telemetry data, we're looking at this from a customer perspective, but think about it from a shop floor, from your enterprise asset management of your punch presses and all the data that's there. You could have internal service requests, like Adam said as well, to be able to really manage that. So something just to consider. Well, guys, I think we're getting close on time. I wanted to thank everyone for joining. I don't know, Marcus or Adam, if you guys had any other input or thoughts of wisdom that you wanted to have us part with as part of this, or.
No, thanks, Scott, for putting this together for us today.
Yep, it's been awesome. One thing I'll throw in, I didn't do a cameo last time around. I was kind of driving and doing portal stuff, but today's Confab cameo is not from Critical Role. So if anybody's a Critical Role D&D fan watching streams, we've been a little dry lately with COVID and everything, but my wife is getting me into Critical Role, so that's our cameo for today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, you know the drill. Stay safe. We will be here in 2 weeks from now, and I think our session, I don't know, gentlemen, I did not check beforehand, of course, again. I think it's manufacturing, maybe.
Upcoming, we've got some manufacturing stuff. I know that we've got Power Virtual Agents coming up. We've got Customer Insights is going to be huge. So
Sabrina in chat to save the day.
Yeah.
Manufacturing. Thank you very much. So thank you again, guys. We appreciate your time. Like I said, we'll be tackling manufacturing next week, and I think with that one we'll have a little more fun with it, with both Marcus, me, and Adam being able to present Business Central, finance and operations, or finance and supply chain, and then also, I mean, CE. I mean, we've got to have a story around that, right, on how that integration works. So we'll plan to tackle those topics for you guys 2 weeks from now as we go through this. So perfect.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you again for everything. Talk to you later.